Hi, everyone. We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And here at Abbey Research, we are empathy educators, and we are two PhDs in social science who are passionate about the idea that culture can help us live together a little bit better if we just talk about it slightly differently than we do. We have this conversation around culture, both popped and lived, so that we can chase understanding others differently and more richly. We do this through conversations about the hobby of having coups that Fiji seems to engage in, to charming documentaries about Southeast Asian beauty pageants, to conversations about body diversity and systemic racism in Bridgerton. However you are listening to this or watching this, whether it be on YouTube or on a podcast, this whole series is about conversations, and by series I mean legitimately just our lives. It's about conversations. We're talking about this no matter what. We turn on the microphones and the cameras for y'all, so we love to hear your thoughts about what we are saying.
This video is part of our ongoing examination stroke rants, specifically for this part of the series, of shows that talk about experiences of marginalized groups. We usually focus on stories by and about women, although this is an exception. It's about women, but not a lot by women. And we like to look at these in order to explore the differences amongst humanity and what it looks like to be inclusive in our storytelling, because that is a huge part of how we build inclusive communities outside of our storytelling. So we're here with our delightful rants and analysis of The Handmaid's Tale. We are on season 4. We are up to episode 3 with The Crossing, which is a little too on the nose for both Dr. Kristen and I. If you are new to our Handmaid's Tale content coverage, you are very welcome. Our PhDs are in very specific areas that align very well with the themes of The Handmaid's Tale, namely religion, society, imprisonment, gender, all sorts of things that fall into the Handmaid's Tale oeuvre, which is why we love talking about it, though it frustrates us. We are not a June Osborne Stan account channel. If you are a big fan of where she has gone as a character, go with God and go elsewhere. You will not be happy with this video specifically as we talk about The Crossing. Real short recap. June's in prison and Luke is sad, and we'll get into some specifics of that. And then June escapes with the other handmaids after she turns them in to save herself, except most of the handmaids get mowed down either by a guardian with a gun or a train, which no one saw coming. Oh wait, everyone. No, I don't know if everyone saw coming, but Dr. Kristen and I were not surprised. So this is the story of and again. June is captured again. June is tortured again. June escapes again. June and Nick make out again. And Luke is left literally holding the baby in Canada. So I know what I want to talk about. Dr. Kristen, what would you like to say first about what we learned in The Crossing?
Such an excellent question. I just took a really deep breath because making my thoughts cohesive around this beyond Jesus Christ, what are we still doing, is a challenge. What did we learn in this episode? Here's my question about June and or Gilead. So we learned some things about Luke, which is why I really liked the Luke story. We did not learn what did we learn about Gilead? Okay, it tortures people. Check, we knew. It is absolutely ferocious in its need for power and control. Great, we already knew that. It will manipulate anybody based on whatever their weaknesses are. Great, already knew that. June will sacrifice absolutely everything for Hannah. Already knew that. June will she is smarter than Gilead. Amazing, already knew that. So I don't know what we learned in the 35 minutes I had to watch torture porn, Saw 2, the Gilead edition. I don't like horror movies for a reason.
No.
And I didn't need to see any of it, especially because we've seen it before. If you are trying to ratchet up the gore of how terrible Gilead is, I'll be really honest, you reached peak gore with the images of women hanging on the wall. So I know this state is terrible. I know this is what they're going to do to her. In a show not tell way, this is not what we mean by show not tell. Show me the ramifications of it. Show me her. Elizabeth Moss has great face work. You can show me in her cell shivering. You can show me the moment where she realizes that Hannah is afraid of her is a great story moment. I didn't need anything else. The callousness in which they murdered those handmaids on the roof. I knew they were going to do that.
Martha's.
I don't mean to be, sorry, Martha's. I don't mean to be a horrible person. I just mean, as somebody who watched television, I knew they were going to push them off the roof because I've met Gilead before, because I've met a lot of things before. So it just felt like a lot of wasted airtime to me when we could be exploring much more fascinating things. The best part of this whole Saw 2, the Gilead edition for me, was the interaction between her and Commander Lawrence.
Yeah.
Commander Lawrence, up to this point, seemed to be one of the Joan Osborne Kool-Aid drinkers.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he realizes that she's an idiot. She's a fool. And if I'm going to put stock in who is really going to be somebody who can prevent Gilead from ever happening again, for me, it's Commander Lawrence, because he's right. You can't make change when you're hanging on the wall. Yeah. And you always need both in revolutions. You always need a dramatic moment to shake up the common people, to bring them to whatever. But then you need the structure and the people in place to make sure that it's not just like
a flash
Kuorama, that we just keep overthrowing things. Because the deal is, the Gilead regime is not the enemy here. It's the idea of Gilead that is the enemy. And June does not understand the idea of Gilead, does not get where it came from, does not have any interactions in her brain with how to dismantle it. She is entirely up for blowing up the establishment. Yeah. And that's fine, but it'll just rebuild itself.
Yeah, and I think we've been having this discussion a lot in other parts of our channels and streams, online and offline, about what it means to dismantle a system. And especially in, America right now, specifically, we're talking about there's a lot of rhetoric around dismantling systemic racism. And Dr. Kristen and I both feel that there's a lack of understanding in this rhetoric what it means that something is systemic. Yeah. And dismantling Gilead is a system based on a set of ideas. And
that are constantly reinforced by every arm and mechanism of the system. It's a snake eating its tail.
Yeah, and the thing that has long frustrated us about June, the thing, as if there's only one, one of the specific things is that as soon as she learned that they were never going to kill her because she was a handmaid, aside from this episode where she thought she'd finally done enough to get killed, I'm like, girl, you still have a viable womb. She feels like she can act with impunity. And then she's surprised when they torture her again. Like, there was some face acting that she was doing that showed me she was confused as to why they were keeping her alive. She's the only one that knows where 6 other wombs are. And she is a womb herself. Like, that's all they see her as, a very troublesome womb. But she can still produce babies. And they lost 86 of them. You think they're not willing to push a couple Marthas off the roof or rip off your fingernails to find 7 wombs that could help replace those 86 children? And for me, I was just really frustrated with her lack of understanding. For somebody who believes she is smarter than Gilead, believes she is at times smarter than all the other handmaids, she's still just real dumb about things. And she was throughout this episode. I think the other thing we learned from June's incarceration that was different than all the things we didn't learn And I agree with you. This episode felt like a hamster wheel spinning. Like we didn't get anywhere except more dead bodies. And like I saw a review that was like, Gilead still kills people, and I'm like, of course Gilead still kills people. Of course we have a string of dead bodies behind June. We have a lot of them, which I'll get to in a minute. But the thing we did learn that I thought was interesting was this mirroring of Aunt Lydia and June's behavior and perspectives. And we talked about this in our episode 2 video, and full credit to our friends at Vulture for pointing out in the episode 1 recap how June's super creepy speech to the handmaids before she gives Esther the knife to kill the guardian was like straight out of the Aunt Lydia playbook. She even said girls, which is what Aunt Lydia calls them all the time. And I missed that. So
I was too busy being horrified that she was manipulating a 15-year-old.
She was like,
I'm glad other people weren't and could connect the dots better, because that's why I should have been horrified even more.
And we see that paralleled really well as Ann Dowd and Elizabeth Moss act the shit out of it when they are in each other's presence, which I think they are the best pairing of actors.
Correct.
In this show. They always bring out the best in each other's performances when they're paired with each other. And we saw that in their manipulation of each other, and what June said to Aunt Lydia and what Aunt Lydia eventually said to June in terms of this fear of everything being your fault, and people blaming you. So I thought that was valuable. Did that need to happen with torture porn? Absolutely not. And I think, I can get into other things, but what else did you want to talk about?
Where should we go next? Let's go to Magdalene's, because on a very real level, I'm actually kind of proud of Gilead that they didn't jump directly to breeding colony, like in a bizarre way.
Our little Gilead's so grown up.
Like, oh, bless. But so for anyone who doesn't know, 2 things that we want you to know about Magdalene's. One is that the name comes from the Bible, duh, but it comes from a incredibly misunderstood character named Mary Magdalene, who is probably actually an amalgamation of a lot of different women. And Magdalene was some sort of slang, most likely a sex worker, most likely, all those kind of things. In the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, she is portrayed as like essentially someone Jesus may have slept with. Like there's a lot of really sexual vibes going on in that musical. But what we know for sure in scripture is that she was an outcast in society, and that Jesus accepted her, and that at least the other female disciples did too. There's, belief that she was at the tomb and that she was the very first person to see the resurrected Christ. Like there's a lot of really beautiful things about the Magdalene story in scripture. In popular culture and in history of the world, people have usually concentrated on the fact that Mary Magdalene was a whore, direct quote of other people, and have created systems of oppression towards women and called it Magdalene houses to respond to women's sexual activity. The most famous of these is in Ireland for how many years? 70, I think, where they were called mother and baby homes. Women were ripped from, single mothers were ripped from their families, then their children were ripped from them.
Yeah, and there were also Magdalene laundries, which were just
workhouses.
Yeah, workhouses for women who didn't have kids, but who were like judged by the state for any measure of crime, really, usually relating to any form of sexual activity.
If you would like to learn more about the Ireland Magdalene systems and the mother and baby homes, we have a whole video on it actually, so we'll make sure to link that below. I was 0% surprised that they called this a Magdalene colony.
Magdalene colony. I know. I actually like low-key fist pumped
I was like, okay,
The
that's
writers.
a good, like, culturally set. Good job, writers. Like, that's exactly what they would call it.
Exactly what they would call it. Yeah.
And so good job.
Yeah.
I was a little bit surprised we hadn't already heard of a Magdalene colony before.
Yeah.
So I 100% believe these exist. I don't know if we'll ever see one after the events of the end of the episode, but many governments throughout the history of the world have taken the beginning of Mary Magdalene's story, Mary the Magdalene, lots of different names for her, and the way that the rest of society, sorry, mini soapbox here, aren't you all excited? The way that the rest of society treated her or them is exactly how our society, all societies continue to treat her.
Yeah.
Whereas Jesus didn't. And it is always fascinating to me that systems that claim to follow Christ miss the second half of her story. Just fascinating. Just shows the baked in misogyny of most human systems in a way that is just, I mean, I'm smiling because if I don't, I start to cry kind of irony. Like, this is intense. So I don't know if we'll ever see one. I can imagine how they would work.
Yeah.
Aunt Lydia saying that you're going to live your whole life in a cycle of blessed service lines up entirely with how Gilead views wombs and views women's bodies when they're not fertile. Their bodies are entirely for service. They have no souls or brains. And so that was in terms of world building and narrative storytelling, really well done. In terms of, oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, I hated it, but it fits.
It fits. And I wonder, and I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, so please comment if you heard it differently or read it differently. I'd have to go back and watch the conversation where Aunt Lydia tells her, because for me, it kind of hinted that this was maybe a new thing.
That's the vibe I got.
Aunt Lydia said something along the lines of I don't know why I didn't think of this in the first place or something. I don't know. So I'm wondering if they created this idea of a Magdalene colony for these unruly handmaids that we don't want to kill the wombs, and we don't want to put them back in Gilead proper, in homes, because they can still maybe get in the Mayday network. I don't know. So we're going to ship them out to this farm where they do work and get raped. So
there was also, she mentioned something about the 86 children, that they lost the 86 children.
Yeah.
So yes, I think the unruly handmaids and the desperation, we need to have one commander. We need quicker access.
Yeah, which was an interesting innovation, shall we say, in Gilead. But the love that we hold for the island of Ireland and the knowledge that we have, we were slightly proud of the writers for that decision, both from Dr. Kristen's socio-religious experience and knowledge and our experience of Ireland. Innovations that I was not pleased with, or plot lines. Trying to think about how I can transition to
plot lines we didn't love. The ending.
Yeah, trying to transition to well, before we get to the ending, let's talk about Luke, because Luke happens before, and then we can whinge about how many dead bodies trail behind June Osborne. For both of us, we discussed this offline. The scene we get from Luke talking to Moira about June's choices is the best scene in this whole episode.
One of the best of the season so far.
And one of the best of this season so far, because, and what it brought me back to was this whole idea about Gilead being about freedom from instead of freedom to, and the assumption that they have removed choice in this freedom from environment. But the explicit acknowledgement from Luke that June has chosen this path for herself
twice,
easily. There was the time she was pregnant with Nicole and trying to escape, got recaptured, escaping with Nicole and Emily, chose to go back for Hannah, and she knew she'd probably never see me again, and she made that choice. And up until this episode, we hadn't heard mention of our Hannah in quite a while. And she was used to manipulate June again. because Nick can't live in a world in which June dies. Like, that was so perplexing to me. I don't even have space for what Nick did in this episode.
Yeah, I need to see what happens next, possibly, to understand how those dots connect, because right now it doesn't narratively make sense or character-wise make sense to me.
Yeah, but I would love it if we keep chasing this idea of the choices June has made. And it was so powerful to see that, like, she never talks about Luke.
Ever.
She never talks about getting back to Luke. She never talks about Nicole. She never talks about Nicole. Her sole focus had been last season Hannah, and then she effed that up. And now she's on this like revenge kick ish until they put Hannah in front of her and she's like, oh my God, yes, my child, who should know who I am. And I'm no, why? Again, why don't you understand how children's brains work? You haven't been her mother for 5 years in an everyday capacity. But
also, I guarantee you that the children of Gilead know who June Osborne is on some level. Like, they have been told that that women like June are evil. Like, that's part of the system of Gilead needs to demonize June publicly.
Yeah. Because the idea of June is dangerous.
And children shouldn't trust her.
So, like, I don't know what they've said to Hannah. I wouldn't at all be surprised if they've said things to all the children of Gilead, you're right, about June. And for her not to realize that seems exceptionally naive for someone who, again, purports to be smarter than Gilead herself. The other thing I wanted to say was the lines that they gave Bradley Whitford in this episode were phenomenal. One of my favorite things, I was just scrolling to get to the end, but I came across this, so I had to share it with you guys. When Nick says to him, I want her to stay alive, and Commander Lawrence goes, it's always nice to want things. Bradley Whitford must have so much fun. And I died.
The scenery around him, it is the best. I love his performance in this. It's so perfect. I also love that he's always wearing a scarf. Like,
he always has a neckerchief. I love it so much.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by Commander Lawrence. I'm so glad he's stuck around.
I'm just gonna adopt that, and when people say like, well, I wanted this to happen, I'll be like, it's always nice to want things.
Speaking of things we want,
yeah,
not people to keep dying.
Yeah, and like, again, full credit goes, we had these thoughts, but they were also very synthesized very nicely through Whitley Friedlander's op-ed in Vulture that links below. Please read it, share it widely. And the thesis of her piece was, the ramifications for June's actions and the problem of always going back to June as the central savior, archetype, hero, whatever, is that a lot of people are dying because of June's choices. And yes, we'll get to the scene at the end. Those handmaids had choice and agency and decided to escape with June. But also, like, we'll talk about the way we would have handled that end scene were we in June's position. Which was, slow down a minute and take a plan. You still outnumber all those people. There's just Aunt Lydia and a dude with a gun. Calm down. And maybe 4 handmaids won't get killed. Who knows? But she's got a trail of bodies behind her. The 2 Marthas on the roof, one of whom was a Martha of color. The 2 of the 4 handmaids that get killed at the end, Alma and Brianna, horrifically hit by a train, ladies of color who actually had sort of speaking roles. And there's a long list in that article of the people that trail behind June. The Jezebels we learn about in episode 2 from Daisy, the Jezebels in like Boston or whatever they're calling Gilead City.
I saw somebody on Twitter say the only person of color who June hasn't killed is Moira. Yeah, that's true, but like it really I don't know if I haven't thought about it, but it was like really captured me for a minute.
Yeah, because the Martha that got killed.
And Rita, obviously, she didn't get Rita killed, but like, I think
Yeah.
the point stands.
It stands. The Martha that was killed for helping her see Hannah, Black Lady. The handmaid, Natalie, who turned in that Martha, Black Lady. June and her friends and her comrades bully Natalie so much that she goes postal in the grocery store and gets a bullet to the head. And like the list goes on and on and on. And when they need bodies to sacrifice, they're more often than not people with not white skin. And we just want to be more people saying that out loud. It's noticeable, demonstrably noticeable. And the longer the show goes without addressing it, obviously they were always going to save Janine. They've spent too much time on Janine to not save her. Why Alma and Brianna had to die is beyond me. I have no idea. Why would you? Because more bodies have to die to motivate June? No. What's like, if things have a reason, a purpose for driving the plot forward, I would like someone to explain to me why those 4 handmaids had to die to advance any plot that we've had so far in this season.
Can't find one. Also, would have been really easy to just overpower Aunt Lydia. She's old and already body broken, and just drive the car away.
Yeah.
And a car will outrun a train a lot faster than human feet.
Yeah, just like push her out, grab the car, drive across the train tracks.
This isn't actually that hard. So that was bizarre. Like in Hillary Keller's recap and a couple other recaps I've read around, they make the point that like, we have to be reminded that the state kills people. And I was like, I don't think we need to be reminded, actually. Like I'm quite solid on that. And the last time I saw anybody hit by a bus was Regina George. And
oh, what did I just see it in? Oh, somebody got hit by a car in the Michael B. Jordan, Tom Clancy movie.
Okay.
But
the last time I saw anybody hit by like a fast moving vehicle, I think legitimately was in Mean Girls. And so like I sat there thinking, like blinking and being like, raise your hand if you've been personally victimized by Regina George. Like it's just, what are we doing? Why did that have to happen?
The slow-mo running, like the slow-mo running was the lamest thing I've seen. What are you doing?
The minute they started slow-mo running, I was like, oh, the only person getting out of this alive was June. Like Janine was a pleasant surprise to me.
Yeah.
Like, if you really wanted us to feel the capriciousness of the state, you use that train to kill Janine.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And like, yeah, the choices they made in this episode, the fairy tale scene of June and Nick, we skipped over it, but we should come back to it because y'all, we really want to know from you guys if you were emotionally affected by that. Maybe we're just like heartless cows who hate June so much we can't see romance, but we read romance novels literally every day. And I was like, why are we running?
Why am I wasting time with this? Like,
why are we on a bridge with a babbling brook? Why does June need to know that someone loves her? You know who loves you? Your daughter and husband in Canada.
Like, please do not hear us that we think that her abandoning Hannah would be easy.
No.
Please do not hear us say that, like, it's not completely, utterly shitty that she has to choose one child over the other. Please don't hear us say that. But 2 seasons ago, she had an opportunity to start a new life and begin the process of grieving Hannah and just call a spade and say, this is never going to happen. And if it does, it's a miracle. And I can work in different ways to bring down Gilead, but I could still do this thing. And that's not a choice she made.
Yeah.
And that was fine. We talked about it at the time. We didn't understand that choice. We thought that the show was going to lean into some poor character traits. Shockingly, we have been prophetic. But to pretend that this is like June's only choice is crap. And I'm really glad that Luke called it out in this episode. And I don't actually think this is about Hannah at all anymore, to be completely honest, for June. This is entirely about revenge. She wants to watch the world burn. And that's a trauma response. And that's where we're at. And I don't know if traumatic people leading revolutions has ever really worked, traumatized people has ever really worked before, but sure, it might work in Gilead.
Like I just flashed Katniss Everdeen, but she was a planner. Like she was exceptionally strategic person before she was.
Yeah, I guess you should say traumatized people without any strategy skills.
Yeah. So, reactionary traumatized people.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't think that works because you have to have strategy, you have to plan. And I'm glad we're examining the choices June makes. I would love it if if episode 4 is her grappling with the guilt of her influence over those handmaids and that they're all dead now.
Would love that.
Janine is not going to be the best person to say, why didn't you slow us down and make a plan? It didn't have to go down like that. That's not Janine.
No, that was Alma.
That was Alma, and she's dead now. And the fact that they did that really like sappy thing at the end with like where all the handmaids started from.
Oh, I had no time for that.
I mean, it's nice to know that they always knew each other, but you never gave us that impression. Alma hasn't been a handmaid of influence in all 4 seasons.
It was weird, and that's not what the red, like, that's not, I mean, yeah. I didn't think that's anything.
So I don't know what's gonna happen with Nuke and June, with Nick and June, or Luke and June. But I'm 3 episodes in and I'm already real skeptical about this season and the way they keep manufacturing capture and escape for June. If it happens one more time, y'all, I am gonna throw something.
For sure. I almost threw something yesterday. We're just tired.
There's so many cool stories to tell with this world. So many cool stories. And they did a hamster wheel episode 3 episodes into the 4th season.
We only get 10 episodes this season, y'all. Like, we need to do some judicious storytelling.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we often talk about like the hours of time you have to tell a story.
Of 10 hours of time, you spent 45 minutes enforcing things we already knew. Cool.
Why did you?
Choices are being made, ones we disagree with. Based on comments you guys have left us in the past, you're probably going to disagree with them too, but we'd love to know if you think we're being too harsh, if you think we're being too kind, where you fall on the spectrum. However you are encountering this material, we want to know your thoughts. Find us either in the comment section on the YouTube video, across any of the socials, which are always linked below wherever you are listening to this.
Yes, and since it's the end of episode 3 coverage that we're doing in advance a bit, because Dr. Kristen very excitingly has a TED Talk coming up. And so we wanted to get these videos out and about. We are considering doing possibly some live Handmaid's Tale reactions, discussions as we move forward. Maybe episode discussions, maybe just a live to talk about halfway through the season. So let us know your thoughts and feelings about
where like you guys could show up and ask us questions and like all that kind of stuff.
We could have rather than this, you wait for the video to come out, you comment, we reply. We'd love to have a more organic discussion with some of our dear devoted HMT fans. So we're kicking around that idea. Plant that seed in your head. Let us know if you think it's a cool one, and what you'd like us to do, if you just want to have like a big discussion, or if you want us to do a live episode recap, because we can do those too. But planted that seed, and whatever format we're in, we'll see you for episode 4 next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.